Hello everyone, thank you Ross for your introduction. So we are really happy to be here today in person. We have talked with a lot of you across 1.5 days, and it was really good to see everyone. So thank you for that, and thank you for the curious one online. So we will speak about automation, but before, I will let Marchela introduce a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just as Ross mentioned, we are here to talk about automation, and not only about automation, but next-gen automation. But before we kick into the topic of today, it's pretty important to say who we are in terms of why are we here talking about automation. Well, the short answer to that is that because we actually are all about automation. I mean, my Capture is here to automate different processes, different manual processes, and such that are repetitive, that are routine, and quite frankly, a bit boring. I mean, I come from PwC. I've spent about 7 years working just across the river, actually, and I've had a fantastic time there. I mean, I've completely loved my time, but I also had quite a few challenges in terms of manual work that I was experiencing, and it was through that experience that I realized that there's actually a really big potential to get rid of all these kind of boring and manual processes, and actually this is where we come in with Alexis to really free up time, save a lot of time for our teams and for the companies out there, companies of all sizes, in fact, and to empower us to invest that time in things that we love doing, and in things that we see more value in, and we'll just go right into it. So why are we talking about next-gen automation? We're not going to say that automation is something new, because it's not. It has been around for the past 10 years, over 10 years actually. A lot of us will have heard of companies like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, to name a few, and they've done a fantastic job over the past, over a decade. We've seen a lot of use cases, like a lot of hours have already been saved, and the technology has really been fundamental in transforming the way that we work. But what we are actually here to say is that all of those technologies, as good as they are, they have been quite tailored and reserved to the big processes, the complex processes that are sophisticated, that are predominantly in the large organizations who, first of all, have these processes, and second of all, can afford to automate them, to implement those technologies. But what we are seeing with the next-gen technologies that we're going to speak about today is that we're broadening up the scope. We're bringing that automation across companies of all sizes, across processes of all complexity. And research actually is here to show us that.
Yeah, so we have seen these technologies being there for a while, but actually we still see in our jobs that 9 out of 10 people actually see some boring part of their job that they don't want to do anymore. And it's represent actually up to 45%, as McKinsey have done as a research on the topic. And why of this is because the first generation was really difficult to access. And that's basically where the new generation, which we will explain just after on what actually it means, is actually transforming the topic. So a use case that we have seen is the pandemic, and it brought a lot of change. And as we have discussed this morning, I think, in MasterCard and with Capgemini, was that actually on the first week of the pandemic, a lot of technology actually developed and increased. And for Zoom, it represented a huge demand. The problem of Zoom and the problem of many businesses is that some of their processes are really taking a lot of time. And for Zoom, it was sadly the client onboarding process. The problem for this is that they had a huge peak of demand super rapidly with the pandemic. And automation helped them to really shorten this process and actually helped them to respond to the pandemic and to really develop at the speed that it was required. And so we have seen more and more use cases over the past years that were kind of like a success key to actually the development of a company. So after that, it's not only Zoom, but we talked about Zoom quite a lot over the past 18 months. And Why? Because we all go remotely. And this next generation of automation technology actually enables this. Because once we have actually transferred to working remotely, it represented a challenge, and especially for the banking and finance industry, because some systems were not actually accessible remotely, and that's why a lot of companies were saying at the time, no, we can't go for the remote option because there is a lot of dependencies. What the pandemic forced is actually to find a solution, and the solution most of the time was actually automation. The fact to build a bridge between the people that were working remotely and actually triggering an automation workflow to actually access the system that was only accessible locally. And so that we have seen, and that's actually explaining how it actually impacts FinTech and InsurTech.
Yeah, so obviously we're here to talk about FinTech and InsurTech, and we just wanted to make it very tailored. And it's really interesting what we've been hearing this morning, actually. I mean, we had brilliant speakers from AXA and IBM talking about automation, and but what is very important is that we've had the opportunity to speak to quite a lot of FinTech companies, and we see that these companies experience naturally rapid growth. And with that rapid growth, we see operational processes starting to become a little bit more difficult, again, helped by the rapid development that these businesses naturally experience. And we are seeing that it's exactly in these cases where actually automation really comes in to facilitate and to accelerate that constant rush for development and change. And not only does automation come in to facilitate and to make that possible, but we are seeing automation making that sustainable and smooth. And the use cases are I mean, as you can see at the back, the use cases are extremely varied. It could be anything from processing payments, from processing loans, from underwriting, as was mentioned this morning. Real-time reporting is now of huge importance to businesses across sites and across industries, because we are living in uncertain times, and having access to real-time information is just crucially important. But the use cases vary tremendously, which is where we see automation come in to help in a big way, because it's no longer reserved to one or two complex processes that see the biggest ROI and the quickest ROI. We're now seeing automation come in to help in a big way and to bring massive returns quickly across the board, across processes that historically were done manually. And actually, even now in a lot of corporations, that's continuing to be done manually, be it KYC or LML or any process involved in customer support. Really, the scope for automation, from what we have seen, is just tremendous.
But actually, like, what we wanted to also show is like, what is the next generation of tools? Because we always talk about topics and we don't really go in the details of what it represents. And so the first part of the solution and the first part of the new generation of tools is actually like the process mining and basically the use of artificial intelligence for replying to those needs. So why and where? Process mining basically happens at the beginning of the process, not even before, even before the automation part. Process mining actually gives a new view to the process analysis. Before, we were spending a lot of time on workshop, on meetings to basically just understand what was happening in your process. And at the end, you had a good picture of the user experience, but you didn't have any picture of the system experience. And so sometimes you were spending all this investment in terms of time, and at the end you had only half of the picture. Process mining comes here, and there is a huge actually acceleration in the use of artificial intelligence to give the full picture of the process. And how we see that is that they are actually the onboarding of the technology in most of the automation technologies. So because it's part of the issues that they try to resolve, is to show where actually there is inefficiencies. And process mining basically connects, in fact, to make this understandable by everyone, connect to systems, all the systems that you can have in your environment, and we'll see the interaction that there is. So sometimes when a user will tell you, yeah, I'm just giving the information about my claim in this platform, actually this information is transferred to 3 or 4 different systems, and that actually impacts the process in a big way. And that actually is the key of process mining. But that's only the beginning of the journey.
Yeah, and just to add into that, actually, we're not only, because process mining has been around for a number of years now. I mean, large corporations have implemented that years ago. But what we are actually seeing now is the active use of AI to bring that process to a whole new level, where not only does it help to visualize the process, to realize, okay, so what is the process now? What is the as-is situation across the business? But to use AI to find opportunities for further efficiencies within the process. So it not only gives you the picture, but it actually now suggests how can we do better, how can we simplify, and only in that process do we actually see automation coming in to be one of the solutions to achieve further efficiencies. But one of the key things that we have seen completely transforming the market is robotic process automation. I mentioned it at the start when I talked about, just briefly mentioned UiPath and Automation Anywhere. And for those who are not aware of RPA, that's basically the technology that helps us create robots, software solutions that come in to automate a lot of different processes. It could be going into your email, navigating between different screens, navigating between systems, helping with data management. I mean, the use cases really are tremendously diverse, but it's effectively helping us free up time for all the manual things that we currently do in our day-to-day jobs. But what we're extremely fortunate is that today we're coming to this event in partnership with Robocorp, which is the open source RPA leader on the market at the moment, and it's and this is completely revolutionary in a way that we're now talking about not just RPA but open source RPA. And open source was mentioned in previous presentations, and it's totally kind of showing that. That the industry is opening itself up to open source and to the use of that sort of technology across businesses. And in this particular instance with Robocorp, they have built their platform on Python, which is fundamentally transforming because it completely allows anyone with the knowledge of Python to, which is a coding language, to effectively create workflows from scratch. And it is done in an incredibly simplified way in that there are a lot of libraries that have been built to support that building of the robots to really make it a quick process. So I know that when I talk about it, it sounds like, oh my God, what are we talking about? This sounds complex, but actually with very basic understanding of Python, nowadays, I mean, even in Capto, we are able to create these robots extremely quickly because Robocorp's platform is so simplified and it has so many libraries that it allows for that to be quick, efficient, and flexible. Like I mentioned, the fact that we can now, use Python to develop these robots, make it extremely flexible, so it opens up to innovation. Historically, for example, solutions like UiPath, they are a bit like of a drag and drop sort of solution, which has worked and it's still an option for some organizations, but this completely transforms the innovation level across RPA. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and as we were saying at the beginning, it basically opened up this type of innovation to a far wider market. Like the fact that you use open source, it doesn't limit those innovation to like big corporation, but on complex processes, but actually to processes that we all see every day. It's not only like the claims in insurance that are sometimes super complex and involve a lot of different type of technologies, but actually involves the different little processes that you have within just your mailbox. And that's actually like what is enabling those kind of solutions.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to the deployment of those solutions, it becomes like so much faster. Like nowadays, when historically was to implement RPA, it was this very difficult, very time-consuming task, and nowadays it's just so not anything like that. With a click of a button, as soon as the solution is configured, is basically deployed, which makes it a far quicker process, and it's far more cost efficient. And Alexis, you can talk about the cost efficiency of that and how that is transforming the.
Yeah, so it's actually enabling as well to base your pricing on the consumption, and it's one of the how it's enabled, and that's basically the common ground with every new generation of automation is basically the fact it's cloud-based and enable new type of solution that I will explain just after, which actually is serverless. I wanted to have a bit of challenge and explain actually what it means, but often we use this word which doesn't mean a lot to people because technically you always need a server. The only difference with new generation of automation is that you don't need to care about this part. You only need to care about actually what is your process and how to make it work and when do you need it. The important part is when do you need it. Because sometimes, like during actually often midnight to not have the user on the platform, you will want to update everything on the quickest time possible. And for that, you will involve a lot of resources. And so in terms of server, it will require, let's say, like millions of minutes of actually automation. The serverless solution and what it enables in terms of cost is that it's enabled to basically ramp up your capacities for like the few minutes that you need it, to make it quick, to update everything, to automate your process. And after that, if you don't need it for the next 24 hours, it will be lowered down and actually remove these capacities out of your infrastructure. So you don't have to manage an infrastructure. And that's a big change with the next generation that we are seeing coming in the market. And that influences actually FinTech and InsurTech. It's actually the fact that you have the capacity in a few seconds to really run without any infrastructure and without any high demand in the IT team for management of those infrastructure. So to go on to actually wrap it, so the first point is that it is your life. Because as I was saying just before, it's kind of like removing a lot of the management and a lot of the pressure on you to actually work on this kind of processes. The second thing is also it makes it far easier in terms of like process and actually project management. But the second part, which is really important, but I will let Marchela talk about it.
The second and very, very big thing, and I'm personally very passionate about that because it's all about the people, is that with this whole new technology around automation, we're now able to empower teams to really focus on the work that they love. I mean, I know it sounds a bit cheesy and a bit, it's not possible, but really these days it is possible. I mean, technology is out there, and we've heard it in so many other presentations earlier that there is a massive need for automation, and the technology is there. And now with for example, taking Robocop as a very clear example of that, RPA, which is a technology that is here to automate a lot of processes that we are currently in the day-to-day operations of our businesses are experiencing. It makes it possible. It makes it affordable. It makes it accessible to companies of all sizes because the upfront investment is no longer as massive. And it totally frees up the people to do challenging work, to do the work that actually adds value, to be creative and to be innovative, and not just spend a lot of our time doing admin things that, frankly, we don't want to do in the first place.
And as it was said by the Saphir team yesterday, it's not a question of technology. The technology is there now. Like the capacities and the technical part of it is there since actually a couple of years. The big part now is like to change the culture. Luckily, what we have seen is like in terms of cultural change, we have gone through a big event through the 18 past months, and that's changed a lot of things. But also it's on the people. It's also like enabling you to do more with less. So it's a cool expression to use, but what do we mean by that is that by automating those parts of processes that are actually low value added, it enables people to spend more time on higher value. And that's what we have seen with like our client and our experience in the past few years, is that it doesn't actually replace the work, but it actually enriches it in the way that you don't spend the time on just doing what you have time to do, but it actually frees up the time and you bring far more services and far more value to the services that you are actually providing. So it's really a change in that.
Yeah, and moving on from that, it completely transforms the scalability of a business. I mean, we've heard so many times through the presentation in the last 12 months of the importance to be able to scale whatever it is that you're working on, and automation obviously comes in a big way to help with the digital transformation of businesses and to really smoothen and make that scalability possible. Which is why we strongly believe that the next generation of automation and be it RPA or process mining are really here to accelerate that scalability, to make it smoother and to make it sustainable for the future. But the one thing that we want to close off with is to never stop looking back into your processes. I know it is a bit cliche to think about, go back into your processes, like how are you doing things? But it's just so important to keep revisiting if what we're doing is actually we're doing in the first place. I mean, we've come to just not question a lot of things, and that's exactly what we're trying to encourage everybody in the room and virtually to do, to just challenge how things are done and keep revisiting. Are we still relevant? Is the process still relevant? Can we improve it? And automation is there to help with that continuous improvement. I see you have a final point.
Yeah, and there were a question this morning. I think it was for AXA, but the question how to keep relevant with all the change that is happening. And basically, what we see more and more is just the fact to be more open-minded to change, and the fact that it's not a journey like A to B, but it's more to be seen that as something to get on, like a mindset to get on, and a continuous actually change. And it's really what is going on at the moment with finance and insurance.
Yeah, so the key takeaway, get out there, look for opportunities to make your work more fun, more efficient, and keep looking for those opportunities and automate where possible, because that's what's going to make you happier, make your business grow faster and smoother. And if you can help with any questions following on from those 20 minutes of us talking, we're more than happy to take those.
So we'll take some questions from the room in a minute's time. So if anyone's got any, we will pass the microphone. I know that feels overkill in a room this size, but there's people watching on the stream that can't hear you otherwise. We've had a few questions come through online, sure. which is nice. One question, someone's asking, is there a difference from a user perspective between RPA and open source RPA? So just to define those terms if you're not sure. So RPA, robotic process automation. Open source just means that you can see all of the code behind it, you can modify it, and it's a little bit more flexible, but in many cases slightly harder to use, slightly less plug and play. Do you think there's much of a difference?
For the user, so there is two sides of this. There is for the developer of the solution and for the end user. So I think the question was for the end user. And for them, I would say it's the same or even more seamless. Because often you need to have some infrastructure on your side or on your laptop, or your laptop to be connected to the infrastructure, when actually there's also open source solution enabled to actually be on open infrastructure, infrastructures that are not actually private, or actually to be onboarded within the organization. So it gives this flexibility.
Okay. We've had a few questions that could all be combined into one, so I'll try and do that. Which is that obviously automation is easier to embrace in a business that hasn't been going for 200 years, has its own way of doing things, people who've been there for their whole career and they don't want it to change, either because they don't like change or because that change could, render them irrelevant. So do you find that startups working with these larger companies, is automation actually helpful in that scenario, or can it become a roadblock if you're working with people who really don't want to embrace it? You can surely only control what's in your control. Yeah,
it is interesting because the main focus for us is to really get on that change in thinking, and because with automation, a lot of people think that, oh my God, my job's going to be replaced, I'm going to be replaced, which that is not the idea behind automation. The idea is not to replace people's jobs. The idea is to make work challenging and interesting, and to get rid of only the part of the job that honestly is not helping the individual in the first place. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done on getting people on board. And of course, there is resistance, and there always, I think, will be. It's natural. It's human nature. But this is where companies like Capto come in to really kind of reshake that mentality into really making it kind of easy to understand. That it's not that we're not here to replace jobs. We're here to make jobs far more exciting and far more interesting and far more value adding.
After there is also the fact that we have seen automation. It's not like fully new. And some markets went really further in terms of automation, onboarding it, and we can see on those markets that basically it didn't add an impact on the employment. On the reverse, it actually developed it because there were far more value and actually far more employment on those markets. So I would say that it's more the reverse. It's normal that it's actually what we are scared of, but actually once we tried it and once we have onboarded it, we see that it's added far more value and actually adding more work to the process as well.
Before we go back to the iPad, is there anybody in the room who's got a question they'd like to ask on the topic? Yeah, please can we get a microphone down here? Thank you.
Thank you. So other than the fact that obviously people are concerned for their jobs, what other sort of resistance are you facing for the adoption of RPA?
That's a good one. I think the technological barrier as well. For example, as we were saying before, those technologies were often onboarded on complex processes. And also the people that talk about it on the solution are often explained in a really as if it was something really magic, when actually it isn't. And that's what we try to basically translate with your presentation, is to make it as understandable as possible. And I think that the key is that also to make understandable the technology, to really ease the transfer for those processes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things is really get people to even appreciate what is even possible, because oftentimes, unless we are aware of something existing and someone doing something, it is difficult to imagine that something is possible, and that is kind of actually one of the main challenges that we are seeing. That a lot of companies are sort of grappling with the idea of, okay, I know automation is great, and we keep talking, we keep hearing people talking about it, but what can I automate? How do I start? There's just so much. Okay, we talk about it, but how do I actually put that in reality? How do I make it real? What are the real use cases? So making that more human and more easy to understand is challenging, but it is probably one of the main things that we're sort of having a challenge with. Yeah. Just bringing that into an easy to understand language that people can relate to. What does that mean for me in my real job, in my day-to-day activities?
One thing with that is you just said thinking about how you start, but actually, is there a point of how do you then evolve? So you mentioned process mining earlier on in your presentation. For those that don't know, process mining is relatively well established now. There are companies that will work on you with that if you don't have those skills in-house. But essentially, it's analyzing, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is it's analyzing an entire process, an entire task from start to finish and finding the most efficient ways of doing it. But a lot of companies are increasingly agile. In fact, there's an entire methodology now known as agile. When you have automated a task and you've put a lot of effort into that, if you're using Python and these libraries from people like Robocorp, it's not something you can just do overnight, or if it is, then you've got someone very talented on your team. If you then have to iterate on a process, is having this hard-coded automation in place a barrier to doing that? And do you find companies will just keep doing it the way they're doing it now, because otherwise they've got to recode an entire process again?
Maybe that one on scalability.
No, but so I think for this part, there is definitely a challenge to do this, but it's not a bigger challenge depending on the technology that you use. And to basically onboard the technology, it's more on building the knowledge or on the culture than actually choosing on which angle you will actually iterate.
Yeah, this has been really interesting. I think I think you have underlined the point very successfully, that introducing automation into a business isn't a way of culling jobs. Actually, it's just a way of making the business more efficient and allowing the people who are there to be more efficient themselves and ultimately provide a better service to the business and to customers. So thank you for putting that across. Is there anybody else in the audience with any more questions before we move on? No? I think we can call that a successful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.